It came from the Nightosphere. Finn is helping Marceline record a song about how her father stole her fries, realizing she has a strained relationship with the man and conjuring Marceline's father by drawing the Phil face on the wall and chanting. The Lord of Evil appears, briefly trying to steal Finn's soul before taking Marcy's base, an old heirloom, and wandering off to steal more souls. Finn and Marcy fly out to catch up to him, with Finn wanting to return all the stolen souls, while Marceline only wants her guitar back. Marceline's father travels around Ooh, stealing the souls of several characters from last season before the duo catches up, with Marcy not focusing on Finn's efforts in the fight to crush him under a rock. It's not until Finn tries stabbing him in a later fight that he finally drops the guitar and Marcy prepares to leave. But unwilling to let the Lord of Evil continue eating people's souls, Finn tries to distract him by playing the song Marcy sang before. Marceline and her father briefly reconcile as he never realized how much he had hurt his daughter, and then Finn charges in with 2 swords, stabbing the man in the head and releasing all the souls before banishing him once again. Through the episode, Finn is continuously trying to defeat the Lord of Evil due to him stealing several souls of various Ooh denizens. But this is in part because Finn was the one who summoned him in the first place, in spite of Marceline implying she did not want to confront her father at all. To Finn, this confrontation was necessary as he saw her hurting due to some unspoken animosity between the father-daughter duo. But not all issues need to be dug up. It's okay to keep some in the past, especially when it relates to a person's personal struggles. Marceline chastises Finn for summoning her father, not because he went on a rampage consuming souls, but because she didn't want to deal with the guy. Of course, because he is rampaging around, Finn is now responsible for freeing the captured souls, which would never have happened if he had just let Marcy deal with her struggles alone, like she asked him to. It's fine to want to help out your friends when they appear to be struggling, but you can't force them to open up. The Lord of Evil rampaging through Ooh is a metaphor for Marcy's own hatred of her father being forced to the surface as a result of Finn's actions. It's not as though helping her was a bad idea, but he was already doing enough by giving her space to vent about her struggles with her Fry song from the beginning of the episode. People will cope with their problems in different ways, and for Marcy, who's hundreds of years old, it's not like Finn coming along and forcing the issue would have changed whether or not she was ready. The Eyes. After a full week of adventuring, Finn and Jake prepare to go to bed, but can't sleep as there's a horse on a hill watching them. They try to shut the blinds, they try pushing the horse over, and they even try moving it further away, but they can't get the horse to stop staring in the window of their bedroom. Jake attempts to blindfold it, he tries to lure it away with music, and he tries to surround it by snakes, but the horse just stands there. Finn and Jake eventually dress it as a rabbit and lure hawks to carry it away, but the hawks only drop the horse into their bedroom directly. Realizing this horse is tearing them apart, Finn finally resolves to kick the horse's butt, and when he does, the Ice King flies out. It turns out he was spying on them, so they fight the guy while demanding he explain why, revealing that he only wanted to learn the secrets of happiness from the duo, but ended up watching them spend the whole time fighting instead. Finn and Jake don't listen to him though, as without the horse costume they can finally sleep. The Ice King sleeps near them, but still doesn't make him happy. A pretty standard formula for an episode of a cartoon is to have a single minor problem of little consequence and then to have the characters react, then overreact to that issue, escalating to a point where the absurdity wraps around to being acceptable due to sunken cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy? While Adventure Time has built up a reputation over the last season as a show that does nothing like anybody else, the second season saw a major shift in the fact that so many new storyboard artists, too many to name, were added to the staff, meaning that the show went from predictably unpredictable to unpredictably unpredictable. This means that sometimes, yes, the show will follow a normal plot structure, for whatever value that term still has, only to maintain the tone that the show is known for while escalating. Funnily enough, the horse being revealed as the Ice King in a suit does not ground the show in anything familiar, as it somehow manages to be even more absurd than if a random horse was really just watching the duo sleep. That their nemesis, the Ice King, would come up with a dastardly plan that was so simple and ineffective keeps the show's narrative structure familiar without anything else being predictable. Loyalty to the King. Finn and Jake rescue the engagement ring princess from the Ice King, though he assumed that she left him in a breakup. So the Ice King decides to revamp his image, shaving off his beard and going to the park to work out, where he meets the Slime Princess, who mishears him as a nice king instead of an Ice King. Lumpy Space Princess overhears this conversation and spreads the news to the rest of the princesses of Ooh about the new Nice King. Finn and Jake also hear of this Nice King and vow to serve him, getting knighted as Nice Knights, where they become tasked with telling off all the ugly princesses. Finn doesn't feel right about this new job, especially when he's told to punch the lumps off of LSP, but the Ice King's beard starts growing back, and so instead he asks Finn to retrieve his razor, which was stolen by the Ice King. While at the Ice King's palace, Finn and Jake notice a pile of hair on the floor and they make fake beards out of it, soon realizing that it was the Ice King's hair and learning the truth of the man's identity. They return to the Nice King's castle with the hair and glue it to the guy's face, revealing the ruse to the princesses who beat up the Ice King for deceiving them. The Ice King probably could have been the Nice King from the outset if being nice was important to him. He had a deserved reputation as being a bad guy, what with all the princesses he kidnapped, and so people by default assumed any interaction he had with the rest of the world would be negative. He was scheming something. But having that impression shaved away with his beard gave him a fresh start, and a fresh start with a good impression, as people assume he's now a nice guy. Remember that Ooh is a land where people's titles tend to be very literal. So when Ice King becomes Nice King and his history is erased, people treat him better, in spite of the fact that he's not acting like a man worthy of that treatment. Finn and Jake even question some of his commands as he makes them sort princesses by hotness and dateability, giving him the benefit of the doubt multiple times over because, well, he's nice. He must have some nice explanation for this. This contrasts with his behavior from before, where even when the Ice King tried to do something neutral or unassuming, people treated him with suspicion. It's easy to use this as a justification for bad actions, that people are treating you like a bad guy, so you act like the bad guy they expect you to be. But this would imply that the inverse is true as well. People who treat you like a nice guy ought to be treated nice. The reason the Ice King's rehabilitation winds up failing is not just because his beard grew back, but because he failed to treat others the way they were treating him, even when given a chance to start over. Blood under the skin. Finn gets a splinter on the door and decides to wear a thimble to protect his finger in the future. But a group of armored men, led by Lord Slicer, makes fun of him for not having more armor. He asks Choose Goose for a bigger set and is given a poem he has to interpret that will lead him to the armor of Zeldron, which is extremely... To get this armor, Finn must first traverse the Swamp of Embarrassment, where he keeps walking in on old people bathing. He must next silence a crying monster, which he does when it confuses him for its baby and tries feeding it, something Lord Slicer orders his lyre player to write a song about. Finally, they arrive at the home of Zeldron's armor, where a ghost tries to convince Finn to play a game involving picking up a ball with his butt. Finn simply runs past him and finally receives the armor set that he wanted, only to realize it's ladies' armor, taking it off because it's too embarrassing to wear. But the ghost from before attacks him for not playing drop ball with him, and Finn can't beat him without the armor. So Jake dons it instead, pretending to be the ghost's mother and ordering him to go play outside. Lord Slicer returns to make fun of Finn and Jake for this quest, but Finn makes fun of him for following around a little boy all day. Then Lord Slicer falls off his horse and gets a splinter in his finger, so Finn gives him the thimble and the duo flies into the horizon. This episode's moral winds up being pretty consistent through its whole run. Finn begins the episode worried about the peer pressure from the group of knights, wanting to avoid being made fun of and trying to find a new set of armor to be. As he goes on his journey, he is forced to go through several embarrassing situations, being bullied for those by Lord Slicer, and having this bullying encourage him to keep going, because he assumes there will be an endpoint to it all. He tries avoiding some of the more embarrassing situations, like possibly getting caught playing drop ball, but in the end it's Jake, who's unafraid of being embarrassed, that gets him out of trouble. Finn spends so long avoiding embarrassing situations that he never learns how to weaponize them. Because whether or not a situation is embarrassing is not really up to other people, but to you. Finn's embarrassed to put on Zeldron's armor, but Jake is not. He dons it and immediately dispatches the ghost, then stands up to Lord Slicer, who winds up injuring himself in an attempt to save face when Finn calls him out. Some people are so afraid of looking silly that they actually leave themselves open to looking even dumber, because their insecurities are taken to too much of an extreme. If you can't laugh at yourself, then you don't really have the right to laugh at other people. Storytelling. Jake is sick and he needs a bedtime story to get better. But he won't accept any bedtime story. It has to be real and not made up, and it has to complete a checklist of other plot beats Jake also wants. So Finn goes into the woods to find a good story, first seeking romance by forcing a goose named Bubafina and a fox named Mr. Fox to kiss, only to learn that the goose loves a different goose, and the fox wanted his kiss with the Bubafina to be natural. Finn then seeks a fight, finding a bear who's being coddled by his mother and headbutting him before running off. He seeks suspense by holding a big rock over a nest of baby birds, only to get ambushed by all the forest creatures who knock him out. Finn awakens in a cage held over a pit, told he'll be sacrificed to the forest for his crimes. But before they can lower him into the pit, Finn starts helping the forest creatures, telling Bubafina to confess her love, Mr. Fox to get over his crush, the delinquent bear to stop fighting strangers, and his mother to stop coddling him. In the end, the forest people thank him for making their lives more interesting, and he kicks his way out of the cage to tell Jake all about his adventures. Now cured of his illness, Jake is excited to start adventuring again, only for Finn to collapse because he caught Jake's sick. In order to cure Jake's illness, Finn must find a real-life story worthy of being placed into a storybook. The problem with doing this is that real life rarely represents stories exactly. Sure, art tends to reflect life, but never all at once. To construct a good tale, authors often take multiple aspects of their real life, then compress them down into a better tale. Most exciting moments of our lives actually have a lot of downtime that gets skipped over in the retelling. What is drama but life with the boring bits cut out? So when Finn tries to make a good story for Jake, he attempts to force it, and this only ends up with Finn hurting other people. Because a good story is supposed to have conflict, but going out of your way to start fights is a good way to get punched out. It doesn't make you a good storyteller, it makes you a jerk. Finn does end up with a good story, though. Not one that he was able to fabricate, but one that came about naturally as the unintended consequences of his actions created a position where he could do what came naturally. Helping people get over their personal issues, all at once, by bringing them together. Rushing from couple to couple to force drama is a bad idea for multiple reasons, but when people come together for a common cause, like dangling Finn over a pit, that's when a real-life story happens. Get enough people together in a room, and something memorable enough to talk about later will eventually happen. Slow love. Snorlock, a giant snail, breaks into Finn and Jake's house, destroying parts of it and crying sad juice all over them. He says he's sad because he can't find love, so Finn and Jake agree to help him with his romantic life on the condition he stops ruining their house. Snorlock breaks through their house anyway and starts to look for Snail Woman, though he's too nervous to talk to any of them. So Jake tries showing him how to talk to lady snails by turning into one, though Snorlock, mimicking his pickup lines, only creeps out the other ones. Finally, they try to find out a talent that Snorlock can show off, teaching him to beatbox and swing swords around. This works, albeit far too well, as Snorlock is swarmed with lady snails, whose grinding starts breaking apart Finn and Jake's house. Jake breaks into his own home in spite of the shaking, and grabs a salt shaker, flinging it at Snorlock and causing him to shake off the home. The lady snails are horrified at the sight of Snorlock as they realize he's not a snail, but a slug, until he finds a lady who was also pretending to be a snail. Having helped the snail with his lady problems, Finn and Jake get to repairing their home, while Bimo gets way too into watching the giant snails make out. Finn and Jake begin their attempts to get Snorlock a date by advising him to be himself. But when being himself doesn't work, they come up with all sorts of other plans that mostly get their home wrecked, until the end where Snorlock manages to get a girlfriend when it's revealed he's a slug and not a snail. He spent the whole episode flirting with the wrong type of woman and then found love by meeting a slug lady who was also being dishonest, the two able to bond over that fact. So their first bit of be yourself advice was what worked all along. As cliche as it sounds, being yourself really is the only way to make friends, romantic or otherwise. Sure, you could act like somebody you're not, and this may even work to make a few acquaintances, but they don't like you. They like the fake version of yourself you're pretending to be. Eventually, you'll slip up and stop spinning the swords around, losing it all, or you'll keep it up forever but never actually be happy. So being yourself is the only way to make genuine connections with other people who are just as weird as you, the other giant slugs pretending to be snails. Sure, you won't have as many friends, but the friends you do have will be much more genuine. Power animal. Finn and Jake are having a rooftop party where Cinnamon Bun points out how full of energy Finn is, while Jake has a lack of an attention span. But one of the partygoers, a large gnome, becomes obsessed with how much energy Finn has, and later that night he kidnaps him out of his bed. Finn awakens in the Beneathiverse, where this man reveals himself as the Grandmaster of the Gnomes, and that he intends to use Finn's energy as a power source for a machine that will flip the underground and above-ground worlds. Meanwhile, Jake is distracted by teaching bugs how to dance and telling jokes to mermaids, eventually passing out from laughing too hard and waking up at a party on the clouds. For being a party animal, he's rewarded by the party god with a single wish, one that he uses to wish for the Focus to find and rescue Finn. Finn, meanwhile, is stuck in a simulation where he imagines breaking out of the control in the gnomes, only for the real Jake to arrive and smash up the place, accidentally rescuing Finn while full of the energy of 1,000 partying demons. Jake and Finn leave the Beneathiverse, vowing to go eat Cinnamon Bun. At a point near the end of the episode, Finn manages to break out of the gnomish machine, fighting his way through hordes of enemies before reuniting with Jake, only for this all to be revealed as a reference to the movie Brazil and that his overactive imagination was still strapped inside the machine. This overactivity and constant need to do something is used as fuel, with an implication that there's little Finn can do to resist his mind running so wild. Whereas Jake is better off due to him being so lazy. If he had been captured by the gnomes, you can imagine him being worse than useless. Sure, Jake isn't great at rescuing his friend, and Finn would have done better in a swapped position, but then there wouldn't have been a need to rescue the dog. After hours of partying on the clouds, Jake is infused with party demon energy, allowing him to rescue Finn with ease. There's an idea posited that Jake is just a bit of energy away from being able to work as efficiently as Finn. It's not as though he lacks the energy to be that guy, he just lacks the ability to direct his attention towards any one task for long enough to have it completed. When he's overloaded, he has so much energy that he is able to save his friend while multitasking. Basically, overloading every part of his brain to the point that the task is given enough energy, and the same way you can fill up a glass by flooding your house. So it's not like Finn and Jake can't match energy levels, they're the same in that regard, only differing based on how they direct this energy. Crystals have power. Finn is investigating a crystal he found on his doorstep when Jake distracts him with a tough guy contest, only to accidentally injure Finn when he takes things too far. Remembering a time when he injured his brother Jermaine and his father said he would hurt everyone one day, Jake vows to never commit an act of violence again. But then the crystal from before opens up a portal, and Finn is taken inside, with Jake chasing after. Jake finds himself in a crystal dimension, where crystal guardians are holding Finn prisoner, saying they're going to zap him until he's a crystal too. Jake tries to rescue Finn, but because he's taken a vow of non-violence, his attacks are completely ineffective. Because he takes too long to enter the chamber where Finn is being held, Finn's transformation completes and the guards finally allow him inside. Then, Tree Trunks appears, saying she's become Quartzian the Crystal Queen ever since she exploded back in Season 1. In the crystal dimension, she is worshipped by everyone, and she wanted to use her powers to kidnap Finn, turn him into a crystal, then make him her king. But when she pushes Jake back, he hits his head and hallucinates his brother and father, realizing his brother was fine, and his father didn't finish his speech as Jake would hurt everybody evil one day. Jake punches Tree Trunks in the stomach, and she coughs out the crystal, reverting back to normal and apologizing for her behavior by offering an apple pie. Back in Season 1, Tree Trunks ate a crystal apple and exploded, something called back to in this episode that explains the explosion was just her being transported to an alternate dimension where she was able to take over and grow powerful. Motivated by a crush on Finn, she started seducing several of the Crystal Guardians until they were loyal enough to do her bidding and bring him over to treasure as an object, all while being corrupted by her own power to the point of madness. You probably would not have gathered that she was capable of all of this if you had only seen the Season 1 episode, though. This is more or less how plotlines in Adventure Time develop moving forward. A character from the first season is introduced for a one-off gag that fills a whole episode. That character is brought back to serve a similar role in a later episode. The writers use a handful of vague allusions that the character made to other parts of their personality to extrapolate them into a more realized person. This informs their later actions. Tree Trunks didn't have a crush on Finn in the first season, she was just a kindly old woman who overestimated her abilities. But here she is able to exert control over several Crystal Guardians with these powers that basically didn't exist before. The first crystal from the first season was just mimicking her dance moves. It's not like this sort of exaggeration is a bad thing though, just the opposite. Taking minor character beats and building whole episodes and even plotlines around them is what makes this show so enjoyable. An extra reward for people in the audience who really pay attention. The Other Tarts. Princess Bubblegum tells Finn and Jake of the Royal Tarts and how important it is that they be delivered to a royal back rub ceremony, or else she'll be decapitated. She would trust her old tart toter to deliver them, but as he's gone senile, the opportunity goes to Finn and Jake instead. Rather than taking the safe royal tart path, Finn fills a satchel with decoy tarts, laced with a paralyzing agent, and he gives them to Cinnamon Bun so he can take the safe route as a decoy, while Finn and Jake take the dangerous route through the Desert of Doom, where Finn assumes there will be less danger. But while ambushing a group of hobos and accidentally revealing what he is carrying to them, Finn loses some of his tarts, losing more when he takes a second detour through a dark cave, and losing the last of the tarts to a butterfly with the laser gun. Finn finally laments that his plan sucked, and that he lost all the tarts, so he and Jake vow to rush to the ceremony before Princess Bubblegum can be beheaded, only to see that they're all enjoying the tarts that Cinnamon Bun delivered. Revealed not to be poisoned, as they were swapped without Finn realizing. Princess Bubblegum also admits that she was never in danger, and she made up the head-chopping bit to ensure Finn and Jake would be safe. Then, the tart toter crashes the party and rambles about the cosmic sweetness. Sometimes you have to work harder. Sometimes you have to work smarter. Sometimes you don't have to do either of these. But there will still be a temptation to work more towards things that seem like they deserve the extra work. Menial tasks with simple solutions, like walking down the royal tart path suggested to Finn and Jake, also come with suggested solutions that are easy. After all, it's assumed that low-stakes actions must have low-stakes solutions. The inverse is true as well. If something sounds like it's going to be very involved and difficult, people will take it way more seriously, even if the work is actually pretty simple. People often hear about important high-paying jobs and assume that they're a lot of work, and then they assume that anything that sounds fun must be easy. So Finn is told that he has an extremely important life-or-death task ahead of him, and thus he overthinks the whole ordeal by sending out decoys and ambushing people on the off chance they are threats. Of course, none of these threats really existed, and it's Finn's detours and loud announcements of the valuable cargo he's carrying that winds up getting him in trouble, all stemming from the fact that he thought he had a very important job to do. If Princess Bubblegum had just asked him to deliver the tarts like normal and never put any extra importance on this plot, then Finn and Jake probably would have taken it very easy, as they thought they needed to. Overthinking is often the result of overselling. To cut a woman's hair. After being called a hero for feeding an injured bird's chicks, a forest witch who overheard this conversation asks Finn for a lock of princess hair. Finn and Jake are unsure about going through with this, claiming they only offer help when someone's in danger. So the witch kidnaps Jake by sitting on him. Finn needs to rush out to find a princess willing to give up her hair, but each of them assumes this is because he's trying to date them, and too awkward to talk to girls, Finn runs away. But Jake tries to convince him of the danger, saying he needs to get over his fear of women and just find the least undateable princess of them all. So he goes to Princess Bubblegum for an emergency speed date involving a spaghetti dinner in the woods. He asks her for a lock of her hair, and she agrees, But when Finn takes this lock to the Forest Witch, she turns it down, saying it's not hair but bubblegum. So Finn tells her off, saying that the hair she wants won't stop her from being ugly because she is ugly on the inside. The Forest Witch says she wanted to work on herself and she wanted to get pretty hair first. Realizing he doesn't actually need princess hair, Finn volunteers to shave his own head, and the Forest Witch gets a new wig, which she promptly vows to use for evil. There's a discussion made during this episode that parodies a very common thought among character designers of the last few millennia of human history. It's one where you can identify whether a person is good or evil at a glance, because good people always look like good guys, while evil people are ugly and obvious. Jake assumes that the Forest Witch is an evil witch because she's an ugly witch, and he is right. They're using Wizard of Oz rules in this setting. But the Forest Witch doesn't want to be an evil witch. She is explicitly saying that she wants beautiful hair because it will make her beautiful on the inside too. The shorthand for good guys and bad guys is more or less directly called out at being something that can be manipulated by manipulating the signage. A makeover's all it takes to totally revamp an individual's moral compass. So Finn agrees to help out this witch, not because he really cares if she's good or not, and the fact that she is sitting on Jake, but because the very act of giving her some princess's hair will turn her into a capital G good guy. Of course, this winds up being a manipulation. The witch was evil all along, and she merely played with Finn's knowledge of the fantasy genre conventions to trick him into helping her out. So while Adventure Time might play up the good guy attractive, bad guy ugly trope so prevalent in the media, it's at least self-aware enough about it not to come across as though it's reinforcing stereotypes. The Chamber of Frozen Blades. Finn and Jake are on a ninja kick, staking out the Ice King's cave as they heard from Flambeau that he's planning on kidnapping a princess soon. The Ice King leaves, so they break into his home to rescue the princess, but they find nothing, continuing to search the place for clues. Finn is trying to ensure they leave no trace they were there, but Jake is much less keen on hiding, going through all of the Ice King's stuff before accidentally breaking a secret wall, revealing a hidden room. Inside this room is a collection of ninja paraphernalia, including scrolls on how to cast ninja ice magic that they memorize. Meanwhile, the Ice King is at a doctor's office to get somebody to look at his sick penguin Gunther. The doctor is Dr. Princess, who investigates the sick penguin as the Ice King tries to flirt with her. Finn and Jake have trashed the Ice King's house only for the guy to return home with Gunther's recently laid egg, and he finds his stuff destroyed. The Ice King demands Finn and Jake apologize by fixing what they broke, only for Finn to hear screaming coming from his bag. Inside is Dr. Princess, who says that he used his sick penguin as a distraction to grab her. Gunther's egg hatches, revealing a pink cat, and then Finn and Jake kick the Ice King as the episode ends. Finn and Jake spend the entire episode pretending that they are ninjas, but they never manage to manifest any real ninja powers until they raid the Ice King's house. At this point, they read through some of his secret ice magic manuals and finally manage to learn real ninja techniques that are effective enough to smash up his home. It's only after this point that they stop to question whether ninjas are cool. After all, the Ice King is not cool, pun unintended, but he likes them too. Of course, it's because the Ice King tries to hide all his ninja stuff that he is considered uncool, in spite of the fact that ninjas are theoretically not supposed to go around announcing they're ninjas and leaving evidence they've been to a location behind. The Ice King is a much better ninja than Finn and Jake, not just because he actually had magic that worked, but because he kept his mouth shut about it. But in the end, it's not about how much of a weeaboo you are, but how much of a weeaboo you act like. Ninjas aren't cool because they're super secret, they're cool because of all of the stuff we know about them. A secretive sect is just bad branding, and this is fantasy after all. Her parents. Lady Rainicorn is nervous because her parents, Bob and Ethel, are about to meet with her and Jake for lunch. So to assuage her fears, Jake decides to write to her parents and come over an hour early so they can get to know each other beforehand, and that he doesn't have a pet turtle. But when Finn asks why her parents may not like him, Jake recalls the Rainicorn dog wars of recent history that could lead to some prejudice. Then he starts to worry. So Jake disguises himself as a Rainicorn by stretching out to be shaped like one and covering himself in condiments, which he almost immediately realizes is a bad idea. But her parents show up, too blind to tell the ruse, and they proceed to play several traditional Rainicorn games, most of which involve injuring Finn in some way. Jake tries to assure Finn that things are fine because homies help homies, but when it's time for lunch and Jake says Finn would make them a good meal, they misinterpret this to mean that he is offering to let them eat the guy. Jake stops them from actually eating Finn and admits that he is a dog, which Bob and Ethel are excited about because they love dogs after one saved Bob's life during the war. Lady Rainicorn arrives and her parents apologize for trying to eat Finn. They were just excited because they thought humans were extinct, and they all dig into a meal of soy people. A very old sitcom plot in the books is a guy lying to his significant other's family in order to leave a better first impression on them, then getting into wacky hijinks as a result of this lie growing larger and larger. Adventure Time is a show that's no stranger to escalation or hijinks, so a plot like this fits in very well with what you would expect out of it by now. In fact, it fits almost a bit too well, as such an overused plot winds up covering a few details that normally would have passed with no suspicion had the audience not been paying enough attention. Adventure Time has, to undersell the idea, a unique setting. The very first few frames of the opening show a floor littered with debris and unexploded bombs. So many of the characters are fantastical, and the physiology of the more humanoid denizens is off, to say the least. Princess Bubblegum looks human, but her hair is made of bubblegum. Jake is explained as being a dog, but he can shapeshift into bizarre forms without this being remarked upon. So for the Rainicorns to say they thought humans were extinct seems at first like it's going to be this setup to a gag about the soy food at the end of the episode, but it informs the audience of so much more. Something is going on with the Earth in the show. A later episode even shows a massive chunk of it missing, and the fact that it's considered normal for such a thing to occur implies that it was long enough ago in the past to be as unknown history. The Pods. Finn and Jake are training for the ice cream marathon when Finn sees a frog gnome knight in the distance. This knight says he is looking for a successor to his quest, guarding 3 beans, 2 of which are good and 1 of which is evil. Finn agrees to guard the beans, but Jake thinks the magic beans are a waste of time that could be spent on ice cream. So he convinces Finn to plant the beans so they can simply kill the evil plant when it grows, then let the good ones live. They fall asleep while waiting for the beans to grow, and a huge stalk appears. But it only spews a bunch of baby piglets who are too baby to answer any of Finn's questionnaires about evil. The next stalk grows and spews a bunch of magic wands, which Finn and Jake also agree aren't evil. While waiting on the final stalk, they create a tiny village for the piglets and give them the wands, then fall asleep while waiting. The third stalk is revealed to be a massive pod full of infinite ice cream, which Jake starts eating, agreeing that it can't be evil either. They then hear screaming from the nearby village as the piglets have taken their wands to attack the mushroom people. Remembering the evil questionnaire from earlier having a question about allergies, Finn uses the infinite ice cream pod to attack the piglets as they force Jake to dance. He sprays the village, saving the mushroom people, and Jake eats the village clean. Finn and Jake are tasked with guarding a group of beans to prevent them from ever being planted, something Finn attempts to do with constant vigilance while Jake just wants to get it over with, basically assuming that the infinite duration of the task makes completing it unachievable, or at least something that can't be done in a day. On top of this, they know that 2 of the beans are good, so there's actually some pretty solid logic to planting the beans and just letting them grow. Not planting all 3 means that 2 good things are not happening, and that offsets the evil from the evil bean. But people tend to be loss-averse, so they're unlikely to let one good thing happen if there's an equal chance that something bad will happen as well. This is why, for example, the insurance industry exists. And of course, Finn and Jake are heroes. They're convinced, rightly so, they can defeat whatever evil they do unleash. Otherwise, with the inevitability of the task failing, the next person to plant the beans might not be so lucky. The Silent King. Finn and Jake defeat Zergiok, the tyrant king of the goblins, known for relentless spankings, and they liberate the Goblin Kingdom from his rule. The goblins try to crown Finn king, but when he turns down the role, this leaves them with no leader, and the goblins immediately resort to rioting. So Finn accepts the crown of the Goblin King so they won't destroy themselves, and Jake becomes the Goblin Queen. After being sworn in, Finn has read the royal rules, though he falls asleep before he can listen to them. The next day, he finds himself unable to do anything without the goblins trembling in fear, as he's broken a rule and the goblins think they'll be punished for it. Finn can't brush his teeth, chew his food, or even chase after thieves, as the goblins must do everything for the king as per the rules. But then Zergiok returns with an army of earclopses to attack the kingdom. Finn cannot fight them off himself, as it's against the rules, so he puts the mute Whisper Dan in charge with a disguise, as he dresses up in Jake armor to fight off Zergiok himself by clapping loudly and deafening the Earclops army. Finn plans on revealing his ruse to the goblins so they'll accept a more active king, but seeing that the goblins are following the rules by doing everything a king ought to do on behalf of Whisper Dan, he and Jake decide to leave the goblins to themselves. With no king, the Goblin Kingdom dissolves into chaos and disorder. But with the king, the Goblin Kingdom turns into a despotic realm with no freedom. It's clear that whoever wrote the rules the king must follow was lazy, but he was lazy to the point of actually running a pretty optimal kingdom. There's an old concept in rulership that the ideal emperor was one who did nothing, not because he refuses to rule, but because there was no need for him to do so. Good leadership is not about doing government to people, but about empowering them to lead themselves and protecting them from bad actors who would wish to inflict harm that could stop that. So a state without a state is one where the worst of the citizens are able to exploit those who aren't as well off enough to defend themselves, while an ideal state is one that leaves people alone, only punishing those who do harm. Or even better, a good government is one that disincentivizes this harm by creating means that stop the crimes before they happen, identifying the root causes of criminal activity or anything else antisocial, and then to introduce means of reducing the likelihood that these bad actions occur, whether it is by eliminating the desperation that causes crime sprees, increasing the level of education of the country, building up communities, or in the case of the Goblin Kingdom, bringing fear of spankings to people who don't, more or less, run the country properly on their own. The real you. Finn is trying to impress Princess Bubblegum at her science barbecue with a spit sculpture, only for it to be destroyed when she sneezes on it. He's still able to impress her by putting out a fire caused by Peppermint Butler and Chet, distracting her from watching the grill, and Finn is invited to speak on a scientific subject later in the evening. But unable to come up with anything scientific, Finn and Jake head to the library to study, only to be kicked out for being too noisy. They disguise themselves as worms to go to Worm College, but end up in a fight when they don't know any of the material. Finally, Finn asks Choose Goose for magic that will make him smarter, obtaining the glasses of Nerdicon that increases intellect to the point of inventing a 4-dimensional bubble blower. He blows a bubble that produces a black hole, which threatens to destroy the whole science barbecue, and rather than fixing the problem, he merely talks about the potential for knowledge that could result from everyone being destroyed. Princess Bubblegum asks him to take off the glasses to go back to being the real Finn, and when the real Finn returns, he puts his sword through the bubble blower, making a 4-dimensional sword that he stabs the black hole with. Finn's sword flies away in the explosion, but everyone is unharmed, with PB giving Finn the kiss he wanted from the start, as the bulletin list he made while smart reveals this was his plan all along. A common plot in TV shows is for some outside force to act on a character that changes them, ostensibly for the better, only to reveal that this change has made them less likable, or it's changed their circumstances to make them unrelatable to their own friends. This change is then undone, not only bringing back the status quo, but also returning the character to the old version of themselves, giving their loved ones and the audience a greater appreciation for the version they had all along. This seems to be the plot that we see Finn engage with during this episode, becoming so intelligent he is a fundamentally different person. He then changes so much that he starts to cause problems, and then Princess Bubblegum wants the real Finn back, appreciating that he would give up his intellect enough to reward him with a kiss. At the very end of the episode, we see that Genius Finn was planning to give up his glasses all along, and that manipulating the plot in such a way was his original plan. It shows how self-aware not only the show is, but the characters within the show too. Finn is able to play with genre conventions in such a way as to use the language of a stock sitcom plot to get his way. The common language of storytelling that has developed over the last few decades being something that people are familiar enough with, we can basically finish the plot ourselves as soon as it starts. We know Finn won't stay a genius forever, in fact we expect it, So it is a matter of how well he pulls off the return to form that communicates his actual desires. Guardians of Sunshine. Finn and Jake are playing a game on BMO, Guardians of Sunshine, where they must protect the sun from creatures in a cave who are trying to get out. Finn nearly beats the game, but fails at the last combo, eager to try again when he hears from BMO that they can make the game real with the push of a button. So Finn and Jake manipulate BMO into pressing that button, transporting the duo into Guardians of Sunshine. But the game world follows different rules than the real one, and all the traps and enemies are far more dangerous than they appear to be on the small screen. They quickly go through most of their extra lives as they run past the enemies who are too big to fight, before encountering Sleepy Sam, the frog Finn has never beaten. They simply run away as they can't figure out how to select the Bomba without a controller, though they're trapped by the world border. Jake tries to forcefully remove the Bomba from the UI, which causes them to be torn out of the game and thrown into the real world. The game's enemies follow them to the real world, about to finish the job when they feel the sun on their skin. Since the game is over and the bad guys won, the monsters leave Finn and Jake to their business, content instead to simply get BMO for trapping them in a video game. But Finn remembers the combo move he struggled with before and finally performs it, banishing the game enemies and saving BMO, who then uses the combo move on Finn for ignoring their warnings. Finn and Jake spend a lot of time studying the theory of how to win at the game and only get a bit of experience and practice at doing this task. But when it comes time to actually play in real life, they find all their practice is worthless because the job is far more than pressing buttons on a controller. So the only thing they can use is theory, something worthless without hands-on experience. The best way to improve at something is to do it. Reading about how to do it all the time won't matter much otherwise. That isn't to say that theory doesn't have its place in a journey of self-improvement, though. In fact, it's pure theory that winds up saving Finn and Jake at the end of the episode, as the combo that Finn struggled with was easier to do without a controller in his hand. It's both theory and practice that makes perfect, as just having practice means making the same mistakes over and over, like wasting the Bomba before the final boss, and only having theory means lacking the ability to execute what you learned, assuming that what you learned is practical at all. Death in Bloom. Princess Bubblegum is headed to a technology conference and she asks Finn and Jake to watch her princess plant while she's gone. They agree, though not knowing how to raise a plant, they wind up killing it. So they decide to go to the underworld to retrieve the plant's soul, with the Peppermint Butler offering to take them there. Once in the underworld, Finn and Jake run past the Guardian and meet several skeletons who are obsessed with their flesh to the point of trying to rip it off to keep it for themselves. The duo hides for a while, with Finn assuming they've got plenty of time as PB said she would return on the morrow, though Jake points out that the morrow is a bird and she'll be back any minute. They start running, finding a river that a skeleton uses reverse psychology to convince Jake to drink from, which causes him to forget everything. Finn drags Jake onward where they finally meet with Death, who offers to compete against Finn in a musical contest. As Jake was the more musical of the duo, Finn winds up losing this contest, and is about to be put down when he mentions that Peppermint Butler said hi. Hearing Pep's name, Death agrees to give them what they want, returning Jake's memories and giving Finn the flower soul just in time for Princess Bubblegum to return, and then eat the flower. Just as Orpheus and Eurydice attempted to escape from Hades, Finn and Jake attempt to escape from their underworld, but instead of faltering at the last second and being trapped forever, their mistake is not knowing these tropes well enough to subvert them as they need to. Finn knows he won't be able to cure the princess plant on his own or find a replacement, so his mind immediately jumps to a dangerous expedition to the underworld because dangerous expeditions to places are what he's best at. Jake's tempted to drink from the River Lee, only to be warned that the spooky, scary skeleton telling him to drink from it cannot be trusted. A bit of reverse psychology of being told not to drink from the river is enough to convince him not to trust the advice and do it anyway. Finn is still self-aware enough to know that he'll lose against Death in a musical contest without Jake, but his plan to simply lie about the winner via Jake is at least some plan towards getting what he wants. In the end, it's a lack of genre savviness about what Peppermint Butler wanted, their flesh, that really catches up to the duo. They ought to have suspected that someone who can open a portal to the underworld and is on a first-name basis with Death ought to demand a harsh bargain. Susan Strong. Princess Bubblegum has Finn and Jake working on removing several taffy tree stumps to distract him from thinking about how he's the only human on Ooo. But as they're tearing up these stumps, they find that one is actually a hatch to an underground area. This area is inhabited by several human-like creatures who Finn assumes are his people. He finds one woman who calls herself Susan, though she's just mispronouncing son, to the surface, and he tries to ease her into the surface world in spite of her being afraid of everything up there. After a day and a song, Finn learns that she loves eating candy, so he takes her to the Candy Kingdom. Susan tries to eat Peppermint Butler, but Finn says he is off limits, though everything else is fair game. Hearing this, Susan decides to eat everyone but Peppermint Butler, and runs off to get the rest of her people to join in the feast. Realizing he may have doomed them all, Finn works with Princess Bubblegum to make the candy people scary enough not to eat, though they're too cute to pull this off. He tries to use shadows to scare the others, but Susan's taught them how to learn, and they're not afraid anymore. When a group of marshmallow men run out to attack and are lit on fire, the tribe's clothing starts to burn and they tear off their hats, revealing animalistic features. Finn realizes that they weren't humans after all, though Jake cheers him up by saying that everyone's a brother. Introduced this season is the idea that Finn is the only human in all of Ooo, though this was a concept that was sort of brought up before and one that really gets developed later on. In Season 1's episode Ocean of Fear, Finn's fear of the ocean was introduced, meant to be expanded upon by claiming the fear stemmed from being abandoned as a baby due to harsh waves pushing him away from his loved ones. But this was more so about Finn's lack of a family and later adoption by Jake's. There were plenty of humans in the first season, although the fact that they were never explicitly stated to be humans is what is called back to here. All of them are now goblins or human-esque entities, similar to Finn but not a human like he is, just humanoid. So Finn seeks out people who are like himself, if only to ensure he's not the last of a dead breed. When he finds Susan Strong and the rest of the folks living in Buttopia, not yet given that name, he's excited not just because he has found some friends, but a tribe. It means that when he dies, humanity doesn't die too. Of course, by the end of the episode, he loses a bit of hope as he realizes that, like so many times before, the other humans were just humanoids, not like him. As with most things early season, it's hard to tell if by the end of the episode Susan's real identity was planned or not. The fact that her headwear is never removed means that something was intended for her, but we never get confirmation till far later. Not that it matters. Jake tells Finn in the end that species does not matter as much as friendship. As far separated from his kin as Finn is, he still has a family, just not a blood family. Mystery Train. It's Finn's birthday, and Jake is taking the duo by train to see his present. As Finn is boarding the train, he's creeped out by the weird conductor who keeps calling him a friend. Once aboard, they overhear Mr. Candy Cane apologizing for accidentally hitting Colonel Candy Corn every time the train hits a bump, and after the Colonel threatens him and the train enters a tunnel, Mr. Candy Cane becomes a skeleton. Finn realizes there's a murder mystery afoot and starts investigating, eliminating the Colonel as a suspect because it's never the first guy you suspect, then eliminating the conductor because he's way too obvious for being so creepy. Finn's proven right when the Colonel becomes a skeleton in the next tunnel, and Finn begins interrogating others aboard the train, each one disappearing after the accusation. After a montage of gathering random evidence, Finn gets everyone in the caboose of the train to walk through his logic. And then everyone but Finn the conductor becomes a skeleton. He chases after the guy with his sword, working up to the front of the train before cornering the murderer, who reveals himself as Jake. The entire thing was an elaborate ruse, as Finn's real birthday present was a murder mystery to solve. Because of the damage caused by Finn's sword, though, the train barrels off a cliff, landing on a mountain of gelatin, which was not part of the plan. Finn is a heroic archetype, and as a heroic type he loves to do things that heroes are supposed to do, like solving mysteries. So it makes sense that his birthday present would be a mystery, and the fact that he's so eager to solve it mixes with a few other things that show more enthusiasm than he had naturally stumbled across one. Finn explicitly calls out a few common media tropes when trying to solve the mystery, proving that people are innocent because the evidence is too great against them and they must be a red herring, reducing suspicion of the actual perpetrator just because he looks too suspicious. What Finn wanted out of the murder mystery was twofold. He wanted something nice and convoluted, and then he wanted an epic chase to climax the whole scenario. He got both of these with a montage and a chase sequence, making it a great gift that was partially of his own creation, as had Finn taken a rational approach and swept through the card thoroughly, he certainly would have seen Jake's foot just off-screen, controlling the conductor. Go with me. Jake is headed to couples movie night, and he invites Finn. As long as Finn can find a +1, he's okay with smooching. Finn immediately thinks of Princess Bubblegum, though she turns him down as she is practicing for the Whistling Choir Deathmatch Championship. Undeterred, Finn asks Jake for advice on how to convince PB to go to the movies with him, and suggests making her jealous by calling up Marceline. They laugh loudly outside of Princess Bubblegum's castle, but she only asks them to be quiet. Jake leaves to prepare a loot suit for part 2 of his plan, while Marceline convinces Finn to take dating advice from an actual girl. Her advice is to prove that he is fun by doing something he finds fun, like wrestling. So Finn combines Jake and Marcy's plans by attacking Princess Bubblegum in a loot suit, which gets him kicked out of the castle. Marceline suggests that Finn do something to get her heart racing, and so they find and tame a pack of wolves to release into PB's bedroom, which gets him banned from the Candy Kingdom. While lamenting that he's never going to find a date to the movies, he realizes that Marceline would be a good option and tries to woo her. She turns him down until realizing that Finn wasn't trying to date her, he just wanted to go see a movie as friends. The two arrive only to be grossed out by the romantic movie and from seeing all the other couples making out, so they bring back their pack of wolves to crash the showing. For most of the early seasons of Adventure Time, Finn has had a somewhat unrequited crush on Princess Bubblegum. Some episodes he's scheming to get a kiss from her with an elaborate plan involving danger, others he's terrified of anything approaching romance as he literally runs away in fear when the subject gets brought up. Sure, it's common for adolescents to have mixed feelings on romance, and Finn's no exception, but here he's forced to confront potential feelings of rejection from PB, and consider where his emotions lie if she's unavailable. Finn and Princess Bubblegum have been the main couple of Adventure Time since the pilot, but without any real confirmation of the two dating, this aspect of their characters remains in limbo indefinitely, which is very common in television shows, especially those that run for a long time. His attention turns towards Marceline, who he actually has far more in common with. For example, his suggestion on things that are fun to do is wrestle, which Princess Bubblegum hates enough to banish him from her castle, but is something that Marceline does in response to him asking her out. PB hates that her bedroom was filled with wolves, but Finn and Marcy had a great time gathering them up to move him over. And sure, romantic partners don't need to have everything in common with you, but Finn was never looking for one, just someone to see a movie with. Belly of the Beast. Finn and Jake are woken up by a rampaging beast who shoots fireworks from his mouth. But when they hear somebody from inside its stomach shouting for help, they decide to allow the beast to eat them so they can figure out who is trapped in there. It turns out to be a small bear who only wanted help putting up streamers for a party, and that the beast's stomach has been converted to a massive dance floor for other bears. Finn tries to warn these bears about the fact that they'll soon be digested, but none of them wants to listen. So he and Jake head to the chief bear, Party Pat. Party Pat refuses to listen to them until they party with him, so they eat pancakes, drink energy honey, and dance with the other bears until Party Pat hears them out. But the bears refuse to listen anyway, celebrating the fact that they're in a monster stomach. Finn and Jake lament that they can't save the partying bears, but admit that it's not so bad as long as the monster doesn't drink lava or anything. And then the monster runs to a volcano. So they return to the party, planning to evacuate the bears by bumming them out with a sad song about how food is dead. This depresses the bears enough to listen to reason, just as a wave of lava rushes towards them. They have to escape through the other exit, and after treating the injured, Finn's able to convince Party Pat to renegotiate with the monster to party in its stomach without launching off fireworks, as long as the monster agrees to eat less dangerous stuff. The bears inside the belly of the beast are happy, and sometimes happy people are content enough to ignore incoming dangers, like digestion. There's a reason for the phrase, bread and circuses. People overlook anything in the future if they're having a good time right now. So when the bears are warned that they're about to be digested by the beast who consumed them before, they're uninclined to believe Finn and Jake, because if things are so bad, how come they're having a good time? At a certain point, they have to give up on saving the bears from their fate simply because the bears have no interest in being saved. They're far too focused on the immediate setting than the facts of the future. It's not until the danger is escalated that Finn and Jake are finally able to save them, not by showing the danger, they still would have partied while being melted by lava, but by bumming them out enough that they could finally learn that things could get worse. This is a state of mind they're only receptive towards after seeing things get moderately worse in a short period, a reminder that all good times are temporary. But by the end of the episode, once they lose their partying place, the bears are able to get it back, not by rushing haphazardly into a bad situation once more, but by using a bit of logic to earn the good times again. Because while good times and partying are always temporary, bad times and lava are temporary too. The limit. Finn and Jake are talking about the ancient psychic tandem war elephant they want when they see a distress beacon sent by the Hot Dog Princess's Hot Dog Knights. They're trapped in a labyrinth and need the duo to help them out, so Jake ties his legs to a stump so he can easily find his way back. Finn and Jake are able to track them down almost immediately, but instead of asking to be rescued, the Knights request that they be taken further inside, as the center of the maze is a place where people can get their wishes granted. Excited for their ancient psychic tandem war elephant, Finn and Jake press onward, with Jake stretching himself thinner and thinner, wrapping around monsters, plugging up traps, and solving various puzzles. But by the time they're very near the end, Finn has realized that Jake has pushed himself too hard and can barely move. He tries to encourage Jake to stop helping them and to allow him to solve the last few traps himself, but with a bit of peer pressure from the Hot Dog Knights, Jake keeps on going. They reach the end of the maze, where a Quandrius offers them wishes. Finn asks Jake to wish for their ancient psychic tandem war elephant, while he wishes for Jake to be rescued. But Jake is too hungry and he wishes for a sandwich instead. So Finn wishes for the ancient psychic tandem war elephant, as it was both their dreams. Then he lets the elephant tame itself to telepathically communicate that he wants Jake saved. The ancient psychic tandem war elephant wishes to free Jake, and they fly off into the sunset. This is an episode all about peer pressure, the peer pressure that Jake feels to keep pushing himself well beyond the point where it stops making sense for him to go on. At first, Jake stretching himself out is a good idea. It stops them from getting lost like Theseus and his ball of yarn. As they go on, the idea starts to get a bit worse, though Jake is content to power through it, as he is just as eager to get the wishes at the end of the maze as everyone else. But Finn starts to realize he'll have to use his wish to save Jake, making half of their journey completely pointless. Sure enough, by the end of the trip, Jake is stretched far too thin to make any sense, wasting his wish on a sandwich instead of something more logical, though this is an understandable mistake as he is under a lot of stress, both literally and figuratively. But this episode is not content to make such an obvious moral as to have them lose everything because Jake gave in to peer pressure. Instead, their final puzzle is solved not by doing the right thing, but by making Jake give in to peer pressure even more. Then rather than saving Jake, Finn uses his final wish to get the ancient psychic tandem war elephant he wanted from the start. The elephant then becomes a deus ex machina that saves everyone, ensuring that Finn and Jake learn nothing, and that Finn didn't have to sacrifice his wish to save his friend, nor did peer pressuring Jake into pushing himself too hard actually cost anything. A Quandrius, the snake meant to teach them a lesson by putting them into a quandary of morals, even calls them out for this, as if he were a commonplace narrative device, upset at the status quo and the fact that he didn't get to deceive anyone. Video makers. Finn and Jake are hosting a pre-Mushroom War movie night, with all their friends over, only to be stopped when they see the pre-movie warning about copyright. Respecting the law, Finn decides to cancel movie night until his friends ask if they'll still gather next week, to which Finn decides that he and Jake are going to make their own movie, which they can show freely. They attach a camera to BMO and have them run around recording random things they see around Ooh, but realizing that this won't make for a good film, they decide to direct things that will happen nearby. Finn wants the movie to be an action-adventure, while Jake was hoping to shoot a romantic comedy, and both of them dislike the scenes the other one is describing as great. They ask BMO to edit all their footage, arguing over which scenes were better and asking BMO only to include the best footage so they can decide who was right between Finn and Jake. Rather than answering this question, BMO shuts off, so they have to wait until the next movie night to know for sure. The event arrives, with Finn and Jake still arguing and making things awkward for their guests, until BMO starts to show the end result, a montage of all the time Finn and Jake spent together, with the soundtrack urging them to stop fighting. They realize their argument was silly and make up, as Vimo says the movie's catchphrase, "Check please." Finn and Jake disagree on the direction their movie ought to take, with Jake trying to create something more personality-driven involving romance and humor, as Finn wants something with more exploration and action, two things that best reflect their respective motivations, as Finn constantly seeks out quests and adventure, while Jake is just in it to be with his closest friends. So they argue over how to best represent the land of Ooo, as neither of them can agree on what the best parts of it are. At least, at first. Because when they started making the movie, they both had the same idea about what to film. Random people doing whatever. The best part of the land of Ooo is the people in it, regardless of whether they're doing something romantic or action-packed or whatever. This is what Vimo's able to recognize by the end of the episode, that Finn and Jake ought not to argue over what's better, because the best part of the world is already right in front of them, and all around them in that room on movie night. Mortal Folly. Princess Bubblegum introduces Finn and Jake to the Lich, who has been sealed within amber since Billy fought him so many years before. She gives them tiaras like hers, and explains that the gems inside will protect against the Lich's magical suggestion. But then the snail from Finn's bag pokes its head out, getting lured over to the Lich and freeing him from his prison. Princess Bubblegum urges Finn and Jake to go after the Lich, giving them the gauntlet of the hero Billy as a weapon capable of fighting him off, only to be interrupted by the Ice King asking for Finn and Jake's blessing to marry PB. They blow him off and rush over to track down this Lich, though the Ice King keeps stopping them in their search, forcing Finn to use the gauntlet to blast his way past. Infuriated, the Ice King kidnaps PB, claiming he was forced to by Finn's refusal to talk, and then flies over to catch up. Finn and Jake catch up to the Lich, but are stopped from shooting by the Ice King dangling PB in the way, and the Lich makes it to his lair where he begins an incantation. Finn is ready to strike the Lich with the gauntlet, but the Lich merely shatters it, knocking Finn over and breaking its protective crystal. Finn's called over to dive into the Lich's pool, only for the sweater Princess Bubblegum gave him to give him the power to resist suggestion. Realizing that the power of liking someone a lot can fend off the Lich's magic, Finn wraps the sweater around the Lich's head and destroys it. The Ice King, celebrating with the other, decides to let Princess Bubblegum go, only to accidentally drop her into the Lich's well. Mortal Recoil. The doctors of the Candy Kingdom do everything they can to reassemble Princess Bubblegum after falling into the Lich's well. As it was the Ice King's fault that she fell in the first place, they kick him out to allow the doctors to work. The princess appears to make a full recovery, though she is still sluggish and unresponsive, so Finn and Jake stay behind to cheer her up with flowers and magic tricks, which gets PB out of bed enough to ask Finn for a few things. But Jake starts to grow confused when PB starts acting up, wilting all the flowers, then later igniting her bedroom before Finn returns with a bunch of flammable materials as per her request. They see her using these items to create a concoction that she consumes to grow massive and angry, catching the Ice King snooping on her when Finn and Jake are launched through a wall. Finn tries to use the sweater from before to rescue her, but she simply punches him away, forcing the duo to rely on the Ice King's help to stop her. The Ice King freezes PB, which temporarily saves the day until the frozen giant tips over, shattering into pieces. Once again, the doctors try to save her life, but as there's not enough bubblegum to save her, she winds up de-aged to 13. The Ice King gives up on trying to marry her because of this, but Finn realizes they're now the same age. The Candy Kingdom celebrates her return, all except the snail, now possessed by the Lich. Had this episode of Adventure Time been pitched during the first season, it would have come across as an insane thing to say. Nothing about the show's tone implied there were evil liches lurking about, and the fact that a major character can be implied to have died at the end is a departure from the lighthearted silliness of the show's original premise. And yet, for all the changes that occurred over the 2 years the show had been on the air up to this point, this two-parter doesn't come across as jarring in the least, largely because the plot relies on so much that has already been referenced. It isn't just some random lich that had been sealed away in the past. We already heard the legend and met Billy, the hero who sealed him away in the first place. Finn and Jake chase after the lich by going beyond a series of past set pieces. They aren't just rushing over to save the world from some generic apocalyptic event, they're saving Ooo, a kingdom we've come to know as a character in itself, from destruction at the hands of a known quantity. The stakes can only be high when what's being threatened is something that the characters care about, something that's almost explicitly conveyed as the thing that saves Finn from being controlled by the Lich is the power of love from the sweater he got from PB. The fact that people care about the world, setting, characters, and so on is what gives the episode its stakes, but it's also the thing that saves it. Because it's silly to destroy a planet that you've just spent 2 seasons selling the audience and caring about, and not silly in the usual way Adventure Time's known for. The Ice King is especially frustrating in this episode as his constant attempts to marry Princess Bubblegum get in the way of the far more serious plotline. It's fitting that the antagonist from the pilot episode, with the same scheme he's had since the pilot episode, is back to interrupt an episode where the stakes of the series escalate in such a transformative way, as if to compare how much the show has changed in these 2 seasons, and then to shove the guy out of the way at the end of the episode when he realizes that PB is now physically 13 years old, and thus too young for the Ice King to chase after. But who can chase after PB now is Finn, who has always been held at arm's length from Princess Bubblegum due to the age difference between the two. At least, now that's the reason he's rejected. So with Princess Bubblegum now closer to Finn's age and further from the Ice Kings, there's a new direction for the show to take, one that is less totally random than before, as the characters of the show can actually develop and the setting can be used to a greater extent. Sure, this episode wraps up Season 2 in a way that could be shocking to viewers, but what is more surprising is the fact that it's not that much of a shock at all. The truth behind the Land of Oo has been alluded to subtly, that by the time we start seeing the stakes escalate as well, it feels like it was just a matter of time before it happened, instead of coming out of nowhere. The Lich does not belong in the first season of Adventure Time, but he fits in fine now. Heat Signature. Finn and Jake head to Marceline's house to watch the movie Heat Signature, where they meet some of her ghost friends. While complaining about how uncomfortable Marcy's couch is, they notice that she can just float and ask if they can become vampires like her. Marceline doesn't actually want to turn them, so she decides to prank the duo by pretending to bite them. She then unleashes Finn and Jake on the world, convincing them they are unlocking vampire powers like invisibility, which they believe they're using to scare LSP while she's living in the woods. Marcy's friends then start kicking Finn and Jake as their next power, which Marcy thinks is a step too far, taken to an extreme when they raise the duo to a peak to teach them to fly. Marceline rescues them from their fall, but Finn and Jake believe they are actually flying and excited to go to a ghost party later, in spite of Marceline's warnings that the ghosts are just going to eat their organs. Finn and Jake arrive at this party and are immediately attacked, finally realizing they never had powers in the first place. Marceline arrives not to save them because vampires can't beat ghosts, but to apologize. While lamenting that they're going to die just because they wanted to be comfortable watching Heat Signature, the ghosts stop eating them, as they're excited to watch the movie as well. The episode ends with Finn and Jake sitting uncomfortably on Marceline's couch, while the rest of the undead are enthralled by the film. The difference between a peer and a friend is knowing where someone's limits are. Finn is okay with the series of pranks involving pretending to be invisible and being kicked by ghosts, and Marceline finds them funny as well. It's not like the narrative of this episode is even condemning the actions of pranksters. The first thing that Finn and Jake do when they think they're invisible is run over to scare the now homeless lumpy space princess. The difference between Finn and Marceline versus Finn and the ghosts isn't whether a group is willing to play pranks on another one, but the intention of these pranks. A good prank is one where, once the prank is over and revealed, everybody involved is laughing, not just the perpetrators. So Marceline tricking Finn into thinking he's a vampire is harmless because it's a bit of ketchup on his neck. But tricking him into thinking he can fly by tossing him off of a cliff is dangerous because the ghosts didn't actually care enough about Finn and Jake to let them be in on the joke. This is why Marceline can bully her friends a bit and still come across as though she cares about them. She isn't bullying them for her own entertainment, but for the entertainment of the group, the sort of thing where everyone gets to look back on the situation and laugh.